Hello and welcome to Business News Wales. I'm John Jackson, the Built Environment Editor, and in this discussion my guest is Damian Joseph Bridgeman, and we're talking about accessibility in the built environment. An acknowledged thought leader in health and social care issues, Damian also runs the highly successful executive coaching 365.co.uk, and his autobiography, I'm Not Spaz, I'm Safe, is a bestseller. So Damian, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion. Just before we start though, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you for inviting me to talk on this wonderful subject today. And of course, I'll tell your viewers a little bit about me. I like to identify myself as a social architect. And I can hear your listeners saying, what is a social architect? A social architect is someone who sees a problem and tries to fix it with business solutions and tries to bring people together through thought leadership and through stimulating conversations, which I'm sure we're going to have throughout this podcast, and just try and change people's perceptions over societal issues. So I'm hoping we can do that.
Me too. Thank you very much, Damien. I like the phrase social architect. As you can imagine, in my role, I read lots of reports about the built environment and how we could do things better. But from your experience, do you think we are actively progressing towards creating what would be a truly accessible built environment? Is the pace right? Are we getting it right?
I would say certain areas of the world are getting it right, and certain areas of the world are getting it wrong. Where we are in Wales, I would say we're not quick enough, but I would also say there is people pushing it back. So I would call on anyone who wants to make the accessible environment inclusive for everyone to stand with the people who are trying to do it and actually let their voices be heard, because it's only via voices being heard in certain areas of society that will actually make a social change.
And in that respect, what would you think is the reason why, we might not be doing things quickly enough? And why isn't there that appetite?
Because people automatically come to, if it doesn't affect me, I don't have to think about it.
And sort of as simple as that, based on personal perceptions.
Yes.
Which is curious, because none of us have the foresight to know when we might need to engage differently within the built environment. None of us have that luxury, do we? So,
no.
Yeah, to me, that's a little bit short-sighted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you sense then, in terms of creating an accessible built environment, that part of the mindset is still around the fact that people thinking, we need to make adjustments for people with disabilities?
Yes. And I would also say it also comes down to, everyone thinks adjustments have to cost something. They don't have to cost something. It might just be a change in how you deliver your core offering. So actually there is no extra cost. And also, when I was teaching some architectural technologists, they could only really start to see it once they started actually coming out into the built environment with me and seeing it through my eyes. So a lot of my work has been based around sitting with experts and just reframing their viewpoint of the world, really.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, because I see these sort of computer generated images of new plans and proposals, and I might sort of sometimes tokenistically see a disabled person in there, but I still see lots of examples of things being added to the built environment. For example, amphitheatre seating, which is very popular at the moment, and but fine, it's completely inaccessible. Yeah, it sort of grabs the headlines, and I think, well, even from that design perspective, we don't seem to be putting a user-centric perspective to this, to think, well, how can everybody flow through the built environment?
Yeah, and it's only recently that Tesco's have put fully accessible disabled toilets into 100 of their shops. And when people say, well, they had disabled toilets, Well, for people who use incontinence products, who need carers, they also need hoists. But also what you've got to see is Tesco's actually took on board that actually disabled people have £1 trillion globally to spend. So they saw the financial value of adding those adaptions. So actually, if you are a forward-thinking leader, you are going to be able to see that if you make these adaptions, yes, they might cost, but actually you might make more money for your business.
And we'll find this in our high streets, in our towns and cities, because at the moment we're seeing the shops closing, we're seeing the offices emptying out. We need to attract people to spend time in the built environment. Now, if that means you need access to a properly equipped disabled toilet to ensure that you can spend a day in that town or city centre, that facility is a life changer for you. It allows you to leave your home and go and enjoy being in a city centre. Whereas if you haven't got those facilities, you're going to be worried, aren't you, about how can I, you're having to think and plan and whether or not you can even make that journey. And of course, when we spend more time in towns and city centres, of course, we spend more money, be it in a cafe or in a shop, we spend more money no matter who we are. So there's a perfect investment logic to doing this, as well as actually it being the right thing to do for people.
Yes, and also if you actually make things using inclusive standards, and Redrow is a good example of this, they put the design principles for accessibility into all of their properties as standard, and they found that they were selling more properties because as soon as people walked in there, they were automatically thinking they had bigger rooms.
Yeah.
And actually it was just how the walls were laid out.
So the intelligent design makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you can sense that creativity. I still struggle to understand why society finds this a challenge to make a genuine change, to actively want to take pride in creating a built environment that works for all of us. And why do you think that that is still an issue? I know you said about people's selfishness, but is there anything more to it? Is it people thinking that it's too much of a cost or too much hassle, or have we just not educated people enough to want to embrace inclusive design?
People aren't educated enough. Again, I come back to the point, if it doesn't affect me, they don't think about it. Whereas actually, if you look at some of the architectural curriculums, they've started to build in now actually an accessibility module. So hopefully we will see more and more. And going into the public consciousness, as we see programs like Grand Designs doing more sort of inclusive design programs, it just brings it to the conversation piece.
And that's why we start to move away from adapting things to creating an inclusive built environment from the get-go.
Yes. Yeah.
Which then sort of leads me to think, well, we as people, we're not purely functional. We like to enjoy ourselves, and inclusive design, I think, is fine. But I do have a concern that we will make a very functional environment for people with disabilities, rather than thinking, what would make it an enjoyable built environment for people?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know, is that too far down the line? Should we get to the point where we get an accessible built environment first and then try and make it amazing? Or do we just raise the bar now and say, people should want to enjoy where they are and the time they're spending in the places?
As we are going through a pandemic, I would say let's use this sort of reset time to push the boundaries and actually make our built environments more fun to be in, because we know the built environment is going to change and the usage is going to change, because unfortunately this virus is going to be with us in some form or other for many years to come.
And that sort of accessibility, if you like, it goes across the complete age spectrum.
Yes.
And I often wonder that simple things, even like the sense of smell that we seem to ignore. Why shouldn't you be able to be in a built environment and where we're planting things with different scents so that people can identify different parts of their built environment, but even just have a better sensory journey as they're going through the town or city centre.
You go to Italy, and there's one town in Italy that everywhere has got accessible doors with sensors. Why is that? It's not because they want to be the most inclusive. It's because the company is actually based in that town, and they actually gave the town planners the right to use their kit. So it's also good advertising if you mix it right as well.
Brilliant. If you had a sort of list of priorities for Wales, what would they be for us to do now? You know, the wish list, if you like.
I would like to see every public building in Wales have a proper accessibility toilet. I would also like to see people being forced to not think of Part M as the sort of gold standard, but willing to push forward. So I would call on Welsh government to make that sort of more based in what the sort of building control officers are looking for. And I would also say to any architects out there, it's okay to go and talk to people who aren't necessarily your so-called experts. Go out and actually spend some time with some people with disabilities and long-term health conditions and really see what is really being used.
I think that is the most telling of things, isn't it? It's very easy to avoid people in the society that we live in, but it's critically important to engage with people, because if you want to know about the state of your built environment, ask somebody who has to use a wheelchair. They'll give you more expert advice about the state of the pavements than
Yeah.
probably anybody from the council. And it is important. I see trendy things like parklets being put in place, and they look great, but I'll look at them and think, well, actually, if you use a wheelchair, they don't seem to be particularly in any way usable. So the person in the wheelchair might be going out for a coffee with a friend, but they're going to be sat on the pavement, and that's not right, and it's where that extra bit of consideration is
And
so
also,
important.
and also, if we think of, we're putting in safety measures for the pandemic at the moment, but actually guide dogs are really struggling with it because they don't know where a line is on the floor. They're just told to um keep their owner safe, so they might actually not not be keeping them in those distances. So I would actually call on people, if you do see that happening, don't don't bully that disabled blind person. Actually wonder why that might be and see if you can help them.
Yeah, it's not just how things should be. I'd like to hope that people are like that, but the human condition is somewhat different, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, of which, and I like the example that you gave of the town in Italy, and it can be easy to focus on what's not happening. But from your perspective, other than, of course, the Tesco example as well, what other positive examples of best practice are you seeing? And what should we be highlighting, saying, actually, go and look at that town or speak to these people? What's some great advice for, positive actions that you've seen to help make the built environment more accessible?
One of the other positive actions I've seen is many hotel chains are now looking at how they can make themselves have more and more tech to make things more luxury, but obviously sort of cut down their costs. But a sort of add to that is some hotels are actually making themselves more inclusive because of that. So actually, you've got TVs that you can now turn over with your voice. You've got TVs that you can turn over with a swipe of your hand. So it's about how we use technology and bits of design that might not necessarily be for disabled people, but for just general good use, I suppose.
Is it also important with technology just to be wary that you could actually end up living your life within your home and never leaving your house because of technology? And in fact, being social on a physical sense, and we all miss this because of the pandemic, is critically important for everybody's well-being, isn't it?
Back in 2000, I believe, there was a piece of work done by the Disability Studies Journal, and they said that most people with long-term health conditions and um, disabilities and mental health issues as well are actually only seeing the world through a computer screen. Uh, that for me, as someone who likes to get out, sit around the table with people, really interact, if you like, have some of that good old fashioned Welsh hospitality, it, that to me is a worrying trend. So I would say let's not see the digital revolution as a panacea to fix things where architects could just be trained to think outside the box.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I think there is even more emphasis to make sure our urban centres are truly welcoming to everybody, and for people with disabilities to make it really easy within your own town, for example, to travel from your front door to the town centre, to enjoy the town centre, spend money in the town centre, but mix with people and enjoy your life, basically. And that's not a
Yeah.
big ask. And then, yes, all the technology in the world to help you enjoy your life more, but to really get that opportunity to not be forced to stay in your home because the outside world doesn't welcome you. And that would be a terrible, terrible thing to happen.
Yeah, that is really true, that we need to just have these conversations to make it prick people's consciousness.
And that's also about starting to understand the value that every individual can bring to the environment, the built
Yeah.
environment. I think as people, we are all different, and we continually say that. So at the end of the day, we can't continue to design a built environment that meets a certain type of person. It's got to be there for everyone. And
Yeah.
it's a good design challenge, isn't it? And, we can create a very delightful built environment for absolutely everybody, but the mindset has to be there, doesn't it?
Yes, and I would also put a call out to any sort of town planners that are listening to this podcast. Actually, if you think your town has got something to really shout about, let people like me know, because I love to come and have a look. I love to come and have conversations. There is other disabled people. There is other disabled organizations in your city or town or region that want to have those conversations with you. So just be brave and actually embrace those conversations.
That's fantastic. This is a subject area which is big, and we could talk for days on it, Damien.
Yeah.
Um, but with that said and done, I'm sure it's a subject which we will be returning to, and I'll enjoy doing that. And I think there are lots of nuances you could look at. Transport, for example.
Yeah.
We could probably spend several days on that one as well. But for now, I'd like to really thank you for your time today. It's good to see that there is some progress, and particular examples such as Tesco. Hopefully that will inspire others. And what we really want to do is to keep seeing progress and more progress, and ideally the pace of that progress to increase. What our viewers will be able to do is read the accompanying article at businessnewswales.com. And that includes various links for people to use as well. And for this moment, I'd just like to thank you very much for your time today, Damian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I've loved being here, and I'm looking forward to coming back for more wonderful discussions on this fabulous subject.
I will enjoy that myself very much. Thank you for your time, Damian. And thank you
Bye-bye.
very much for watching us.